Aloha, Isten áldjon. This is how I greeted you almost a year ago when we worshiped together in your beautiful church. Coming from a relatively conservative Christian community, looking from the point of view of our classic church building and classic worship order, your church and your presence in the church was all about freedom, about safety, and about the trust to be ourselves. Seeing how Hawaiian your minister, Reverend TJ, was dressed, I remember affording myself the luxury of leaving my black coat in the office and worshiping just in my white shirts. You probably all know the feeling when you have a wonderful dream and you wake up and you are disappointed to realize that it was only a dream. For me and my family, the feeling is sometimes the opposite. We remember our wonderful time on your uniquely beautiful and legendary island, the warm weather in January and February, and the warm welcoming we experienced in your community throughout our visit. And then we expect to wake up and realize that it was just a dream, but we realize that in fact it was reality. How unexpectedly fast and global the changes are in our lives since then. Among all the bad things this pandemic brought, there are some positive consequences too. For example, since last spring, we broadcast all our worship services, and not only people living in our small town can be a part of the worship service, but also families who live abroad but still long for staying in touch with their homeland, their past, their roots. Another positive effect of the new rules is that we are together on this Sunday. Although we said goodbye hoping for new encounters in the future, we never thought we are going to see each other so soon, less than a year after our visit. We came home last June, filled with the energy of wonderful experiences from the 10 months we spent in the United States. Surprise, surprise, we didn't manage to change the world around us since then. In fact, we became even more aware of the distance between liberalism that we met in the most extreme forms in California or Hawaii, and the conservative views that are so dominant in our society, in our Christian Orthodox country, but even among our theoretically more liberal people in the Unitarian Church of Transylvania. This distance is real, but I am also convinced that love and trust, common goals of justice and equality, can build bridges that link the seemingly distanced theories and communities. In one of my sermons in your wonderful church, I tried to convince you last year that not only your island, homeland, is beautiful and legendary, but our small piece of the world is also full of beauties and legends. Today, the occasion on which you invited me is a perfect one to speak about the unique values of Transylvania. Transylvania was a part of the Hungarian kingdom since its founding at the beginning of the 11th century. In the context of the fall of the Hungarian kingdom due to the expansion of the Turkish Empire, Transylvania became an independent country in the 16th century. In this small and new country, in 1568, Prince John Sigismund proclaimed the Edict of Torda, the law of religious freedom. This act guaranteed security and freedom for members and ministers of the Christian denominations that competed for supremacy all over Europe in those times. While heretics were burnt, wars were fought, communities were banished because of differing religious views in Western Europe, Transylvania became the land of religious tolerance, as many free thinkers, liberals, we may call them like that today, were happy to settle and work in Transylvania. The Edict of Religious Freedom was first of all a political act. The young prince and his counselors knew that their young and fragile country will need stability inside. The Austrian and the Turkish empires were threateningly close, and the prince was forced to fight an ethnic community of the country to make them accept the new rules of the new country. They couldn't afford the luxury of a religious conflict leading to a civil war. The law of religious freedom saved the country and kept religious conflicts on the level of principles, of reason, of common sense. But the Edict of Torda was not only a political act. There were great theologians and ethical thinkers behind it too. Francis David, seen as the founder of the Unitarian religion in Transylvania, and his co-workers were inspired by great European theologians and thinkers who considered religious tolerance a human right, a human responsibility, and the duty of love towards God and towards other people. Francis David says in one of his statements of tolerance, "There is no greater mindlessness and absurdity than to force conscience and the spirit with external power, when only their Creator has authority for them." The text of the law also argues that no one should be hurt because of their religion, because faith is a gift from God, and whoever hurts someone because of their faith hurts God and hurts God's commandments. Unfortunately, the talented and inspired young prince John Sigismund died at a very young age, only 3 years after proclaiming this act. Those who followed him weren't so dedicated to religious tolerance, but they couldn't erase this act. The irony is that Francis David, a champion of religious tolerance when he was at power, died in a prison cell because of his faith in 1579. He lost everything. He died alone, left alone even by those who were his friends and co-workers, even by his community. For him, speaking about the one God, proclaiming the truth of the divine, and stating the importance of minimal respect and tolerance towards others, towards people of different faith, was not a choice, but a command from God. Like the prophets of the Old Testament, he felt an uncontrollable urge to speak the truth, to proclaim it in times when it was appreciated, but also in times when it was dangerous and deadly. The future of our communities, the Unitarian Universalist community in Honolulu or in the US in general, and the future of the Unitarian community in Transylvania is not so dependent on social processes. It depends on this question: do we have at least one truth? Or do we have truths that we feel an urge to proclaim, even if proclaiming it could bring us danger, uncomfortable feelings? Some of the possible truths that we have to proclaim in one way or in another. Human life is more than the body. Human soul is real and valuable. The existence of different views on big questions of humanity is not a problem, but a possibility, an asset. Happiness can't be an individual achievement. My happiness is only possible in a collective happiness of many, of all. Freedom is not a permanent state of things, but it is always a process. We always have to work and stand up for it. Please feel free to complete the list of truths that we have to proclaim. What is your community's truth? What is your personal truth? Besides our everyday struggle for material and intellectual and spiritual welfare, what is we dream about? How does the world look in our idealistic dreams? and how disappointed we are to wake up from those dreams to the harsh realities of our world. And does this disappointment makes us bitter and convince us to give up on our dreams? Or it gives us inspiration and positive anger to be stronger and more ready to work, fight, to do something for those ideals to become reality? The most tempting question we raise towards ourselves is, can we do it? I have an answer from the Gospel of Mark, from a story of the Gospel of Mark. A father brings his sick son to Jesus. The boy is possessed by a bad spirit that seizes him time and time again. It throws him to the ground and tries to make the boy destroy himself. The father says to Jesus, "If you can do something, help us." And Jesus answers the father, "If you can, everything is possible to the ones who believe." This is how the world looked in the 16th century, just like this boy. A world that was always changing, always a challenge for people living in that age. A world that sometimes wanted to destroy itself. But there were people, there were real leaders who believed and made a difference. I think that we can agree that our world, in our present, the world looks possessed and seized by bad spirits sometimes. It looks like it is ready to destroy itself, just like the boy in the story. And we may agree that we have to be the ones to believe and to make a difference. Jesus gives us the answer. Everything is possible to the ones who believe. The source of energy of belief can vary. It can be God. It can be Jesus' teachings and his life. It can be the Bible. It can be the 100 years old traditions here in Transylvania. But it can also be the feeling of interconnectivity, the responsibility of the mature human being towards themselves, towards others, towards the earth, the conviction that it is good to be good. It is happiness to serve others with love. We are proud to be the followers of those who proclaimed religious freedom as a law. We are responsible to measure ourselves and ask ourselves if we are honest and loyal keepers of this heritage. And without anchoring ourselves in the past, we need to find the old truths that must be proclaimed and said over and over again in our present lives. Francis David was a dreamer. He fell from a high status of his career, but his life and sacrifice had its results. He believed, and it was possible for him to make a difference. When we remember him, and we remember every hero of religious freedom and tolerance, we have to rediscover our sources of faith that may differ from one community to the other. And we have to use those sources to work, to fight, and to stand up for values, for a world of ideas that works for all. That is a common goal and dream of humans of different ethnic, racial, religious communities. Real freedom is when we find and choose freely the purposes and the communities that we want to serve. On the Sunday of religious freedom, may we be blessed with many truths, valuable purposes that we can serve as individuals and as communities. God bless us. Isten áldjon. Amen. Now, please join in singing our hymn of reflection, We Shall Be Known.